going to pass over now to Ella, who is going to talk about intersectionality and its meanings, but also to have a discussion with Mina Salami's article on conscientious feminism and your interpretation of that.
Yeah, so Mina can't be here tonight, unfortunately, but I'm very honoured to take her place and discuss her article. But before I delve into Ms. Afropolitan or Mina Salami's essay on conscientious feminism, I'm hoping that a short reflection on my own feminism, a feminist journey, and what intersectionality means to me will allow those of us who might have claimed that label for a little bit longer to kind of reminisce on the beginnings, and those of us who might be relatively new to the movement to identify with my journey, which has me quite excited because it's still very much at the beginning and there's still so much room for growth. So I'll be using the terms feminism and intersectionality quite interchangeably here, because just to quote Flavia Zordan, my feminism will be intersectional or it will be bullshit, or at least it tries to be. So feminism to me has become very much a lifeline that kind of provides a lens through which I can view and analyze my life, allowing me to situate experiences that I didn't quite understand before into a wider structure, and show me that I'm not alone. It shows me that my experiences are not isolated, but actually part of a whole trajectory of oppression, and most importantly, that I have a right to be angry. Angry when strangers come and touch my hair out of curiosity, or when another German tells me that I can't possibly really be from Berlin. And my feminism has most definitely been a journey. So while I've always been involved in feminist things, so to speak, I actually started out at the complete other end of the spectrum, falling into many traps that mainstream or white feminism is often criticized for. And to be quite honest, I used to probably suffer from what you would call white savior complex, because I was convinced that I would, during high school, I was convinced that I would save all the poor African women from the claws of poverty, civil war, famine, disease, and I thought that my Kenyan background justified my intentions, because after all, I was from there, so I had every right to be there. But coming to SOAS knocked those ideas out of me very quickly, and I was left feeling quite angry with myself, and also very angry with the mainstream feminists who tried to save all the brown women who were very well beyond my age, but never had learned any better. And this realization, for which I will forever be thankful to SOAS for, was the beginning of a journey. And I had friends who identified as feminists and were very vocal about it. So I was intrigued by this label, and I began to read into it. But I quickly realized that the so-called white feminist literature only marginally applied to me. And so I quickly moved on to the likes of Bell Hooks, Angela Davis, while also talking a lot to a friend of mine who will have a few words to say later, called Ivanka. And talking to her and reading black feminist literature and blogs made me very angry for a very long time. And in fact, I was furious with the world, and my feminism became incredibly reactive. And that was around the time when the Anti-Woman Collective, who also helped put this event together, put on an event series called Anti-Woman, What's Race Got to Do With It, last February here at SOAS, which actually left me quite drained and still angry, because I felt that we were very much stuck in a reactive feminism that offered few solutions and a way forward. Then also, as a black German, I didn't feel like the black feminism of the UK or the US always fit my experiences, because it's quite a unique context. But I continued reading. I still went to events. I was venting on Twitter, until there was a time when one morning I was on my way to uni, and I was reading an article about how the world had once again wronged black people. And I sent that article to a friend who told me I just needed to stop reading these kind of articles for breakfast, because they would just ruin my entire day. And so this really got me thinking, and I began to take a step back, take breaks from social media, until just recently when I was buying books on Amazon, and it's so kindly suggested that I buy a documentary called Audre Lorde, The Berlin Years. And I thought to myself, how is this even possible? What could Audre Lorde have possibly looked for in Berlin? Only to find out that there was an entire movement by Afro-German women inspired by Audre Lorde, who very boldly claimed their place in Germany while fighting the racism that is still so prevalent there. And I was actually in shock. I watched the documentary and I couldn't believe that my story, the story of Afro-German women, had been documented, and I was able to see myself on screen, a story that I could fully claim as my own. And it is this part of my journey that I am still on, exploring a movement of Afro-German women who left a legacy that is so rich and means so much to me, and allows me to live my life as a Black German woman unapologetically. So I've kind of journeyed from a feminism that had me complicit in the oppression of Black women, all the way to a feminism that refuses to center dominant groups and reserves the right to self-preservation. So I do not see myself forced to engage with incidents of sexism, racism, misogyny, etc., that maybe those of you who are on Twitter are quite familiar with. And it's also a feminism that is conscientious, which brings me to Minna's Complicit No More essay on toxic wars versus conscientious feminism. And what Minna says is that I shall live, but that is all I shall do for patriarchy, which is a phrase that has really, really stuck with me, because what she talks about is that by our sheer existence, we participate in a patriarchal system. However, rather than seeing that as a downer, she sees it as an opportunity for us to engage with what she terms conscientious feminism. And for those of you who might not be familiar with Minna's article, it is about a feminism which, to quote her, seeks to understand the systems, structures, attitudes, institutions, rituals, traditions, laws, and customs that oppress, and a feminism that subsequently finds them intolerable. But it is not just about fighting the oppression of your own race, age, class, but of all women, to allow all of us to be our full selves. And it is the type of feminism that requires debates and arguments as long as they are constructive and allow us to move forward. A feminism that says our differences should not burn bridges, but instead we need to be respectful, give each other space, but ultimately come together to fight oppression. And this is of course easier said than done, but I think it is a feminism that is definitely worth striving for. And Minna's article raised some issues, some on which I would like to comment on and others which I just want to put out there so we can perhaps come back to them during the Q&A. So the first one is that there's always an issue of carving out space for Black women. So Minna's essay refers to the 1992 Women in Africa and in the African Diaspora Conference, which took place in Nigeria, in which there was a lack of space for Black women to discuss amongst each other, which led to all kinds of trouble until finally such a space was created. And this is a summary that does not do Minna's writing any justice, so I do encourage you to read up on it in your own copies. But it's an issue, this issue of lack of space is one that I'm very familiar with, especially when we put together the Anti-Woman event series, because there are clearly not enough spaces for Black women to come together. We had so many women from outside the university come who emphasized this fact repeatedly. Then part of the event was also a play called For Colored Girls Who Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. And it just had us continuously justify and defend the fact that a play called For Colored Girls, a story about 7 African-American women, should actually be cast with 7 Black women. It is something that people were just not getting. So I also experienced some backlash during my Black Officer campaign when a guy accused me of being a segregationist because I wanted to create spaces for Black students to discuss our place in education. So I just think that carving out space is something we need to consciously put effort in without letting others distract us and telling us this is not important. Then before I joined the panel, I tweeted in a question that I would still very much like to discuss, because there seems to be somewhat of a discrepancy between African diaspora and Africans on the continent. So Minna touches on this when she talks about African women at the conference I mentioned earlier, not seeing the need to have a separate space, while women from the African diaspora very much insisted on it. And I wonder to what extent that came from the African women's experience, that they had such space freely available and might not have been able to identify with the constant struggle for space we face here. And I'm by no means an expert on what is happening on the continent. I go to Kenya to visit family once a year, but it has just let me observe things that I find very interesting, such as this political blackness that we have here, that where I come from in Kenya is not a thing. There's a strict hierarchy of people of color. And just to close this reflection on both my feminism and Minna's article, I just want to quote Minna again, that I shall live, but that is all I shall do for patriarchy. And I would like to add that this is also all I shall do for other systems of oppression, as we hopefully continue to refuse to censor dominant groups and continue on our feminist journeys.